I'm a big fan of Omniscient Reader. I feel like I haven't talked about the series enough, but I've kind of always struggled on this series. I've read it, and then reread it, and then reread it, and so on, but I've tried very hard to figure out how to make a video on this series, and I think I've made 2 pretty good ones, but I've always struggled with it, you know? But there's an aspect of the series I've always wanted to cover, and there's unfortunately not any characters or theories, but if you have any theories, send them my way, or in my new Discord server, ayo. Anyways, what I wanted to take a look at takes a little bit of an explanation. The story of Omniscient Reader technically follows Doja Kim, a kind of basic person, just someone who goes to work and lives a pretty ordinary life. The biggest thing Doja Kim has is a web novel he's been reading for 10 years, with a total number of 3,149 episodes, with an average viewer count of 1.9 and an average comment count of 1.08. This series isn't well loved, as Doja Kim is the only one who's reading 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse. At least the only one who's been reading past episode 100. However, Doja Kim's incredibly boring life would soon change, as the exact story he's been reading for 10 years would become reality, and he's the only person who knows the entire story. Doja Kim gains an upper hand in every aspect of the new world. He knows the system, and because he knows the system, he knows how to get ahead. He knows the punches before they're thrown. He knows the correct long-term choices to make. But that's not why we're here. The reason we're here is because of that story. 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse. The title and the last chapter of it. There are 3 ways to survive the apocalypse. Everything is fading and becoming unclear now. But one thing is certain. If you're reading this, you will survive. Now, I'm a pretty curious person, so I gotta know. What are the 3 ways to survive the apocalypse? How do you survive the apocalypse? And surely there's a best way to survive the apocalypse. Man, this video is really just for me, isn't it? Now, we've technically been given the first way to survive the apocalypse. The first way of surviving the apocalypse. This man who is strangling me is living proof of the first method. Jun-Yuk-Yu, the Regressor. This man will kickstart the tragedy that will turn the world upside down. Simple. Okay, not simple, but simplest, which only means it's gonna get a little more difficult moving on, isn't it? Alright, so how is Jun-Yuk-Yu living proof of the first method? Well, we should know a little bit about Jun-Yuk, right? First things first, the Regressor. The Regressor is someone who, when they die, they travel back to the start of the scenarios. When they restart, they retain all their memories of their previous lives. Not to mention they bring back certain skills and items and such. It's not super explained to us 100%, but that's seemingly what they have. Always having an advantage on their next life. Now, I don't think the first way of surviving the apocalypse is that. Mainly because I'm not sure how that would work. Jun-Yuk-Yu is also the protagonist of 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse and technically this new world we're following. So, do you have to be a protagonist to survive the apocalypse? Honestly, I don't think so. That was my first thought until I read this chapter again. It says Jun-Yuk-Yu is living proof of the first method. Living proof of the first method. Proof that the first method works, not proof that it exists. If it was something as specific as being a regressor or protagonist, I think they would have worded a little differently. No, I think these methods will be a little more abstract and tied to characters. And yeah, the newest chapter kind of goes against this thought process, but I'm gonna stick to it because it's a fun thought experiment. So let's see if we can dig up some abstract ways to survive the apocalypse. Specifically with the characters Jun-Yuk-Yu, Doja Kim, and Sang-Yu. So what's Jun-Yuk-Yu's way? I think it's alone. Let me explain. The best thing Jun-Yuk-Yu has going for him is also his biggest weakness. Being a regressor, like I explained before, is someone who when they die, they travel back to the start of the scenarios, retaining their memories, items, skills, such whatever. But no one else does. Like I said, this gives a huge advantage with upcoming challenges. Not only do they know the challenges they're going to face, but they also have skills and such to combat these challenges. However, that's the problem, isn't it? When they die, they remember all that happened. But no one else does. And we get to hear his pain when him and Doja Kim are in a duel. We get to hear his inner thoughts. It pains me. How many times more do I have to repeat this? Everything will go back to the way it was if I regress again. My companions will lose their memories, and the histories I've existed in will be erased. And once again, everything will repeat itself. We later hear Doja Kim explain that while Jeonhyuk-yu is incredibly strong, probably the strongest person alive, he has a fatal flaw. After living life after life after life, restarting not just scenarios, but every relationship he's had. Every time he's connected with someone, every time he's opened up with someone, every time he's loved someone, everything is forgotten. Now here, he's only regressed 3 times. However, in the web novel, his regressions get up there. I can't find an exact number. I think it's like triple digits. It might be more in like the original source material, because this is based on whatever. But whatever it is, it's a lot. He's had to go through life seeing the people he's loved simply forget about him. Which makes me think of his way of surviving the apocalypse. The first way of surviving the apocalypse is alone. Yes, he gets a team. Yes, he kind of, sort of, if you squint at it, relies on others. But he doesn't connect with people anymore. He barely seems to see them as people anymore. During the fight, he thinks, I am the only living thing left in this world. I'm all alone. Whether he likes it or not, Jeonhyuk-yu truly believes himself to be alone in this world. What's the point of growing close to people if they're just gonna forget who you are? If they're just gonna die? That's a lot for the first person. Let's save Doja Kim for the end because I love him and I think he's great. And let's take a look at Sang-yu. Sang-yu starts the series as a talented working woman. She's smart and skilled, learning Spanish at the beginning of the series and asking for money in Spanish. Even Doja Kim considers her to be in a different league than him. And while things do change during the end of the world, Sang-yu is still pretty quick to adapt. Mainly due to Doja Kim's knowledge on what's going to happen, but she still has a talent to adapt to whatever's going on. However, there were still things that she didn't quickly adapt to. Mainly death and killing. Of course, she and just about everyone else in society were raised to value life. So it kind of makes sense that the people who are still alive are people who don't value life as much. There are people who don't hesitate to kill others, because someone else's death could mean your life. You can't hesitate in this new world. Sang-yu always kind of struggled a little bit with this. She was always hesitant or nervous when it comes to combat or killing. That was until the most recent arc, where Sang-yu and just about every other character went off on their own. But she's the first to come back, and come back in a big way. Gone is the person who's nervous in combat and anxious about killing, and comes in Sang-yu, who literally feels like a trained assassin, unafraid to straight up murder entire crowds. Now, what kind of gets ruined in this newest chapter is we get told the second way, number 2, in 3 ways to survive the apocalypse. The people who returned after destroying other dimensions for their survival. Returnee. However, I'm gonna stick by my abstract readings because, I don't know, it's fun. We see that this returnee was a schoolboy brought into another dimension to fight and survive. Promised to be a hero, but ended up being a killer. Losing morals to survive, killing to survive. Way 2. The loss of morals. Sometimes survival means you have to drop the things that you hold dear. The value of life, the value of being truthful, or of being honorable, or of being morally right. Sang-yu lost some of her morals, and she still seems pretty shaken up by what she's done. But she had to do it to survive, It's kill or be killed, right? Going to the start of the chapter that kind of ruined this video, we get this direct quote from 3 Ways to Survive the Apocalypse. Some travel back in time, some travel to other dimensions, and some are born again. People have different ways to survive the apocalypse. Jeonhyuk Yu kind of travels back in time when he dies. The returnees, who I've linked to Sangha-yu, travel to other dimensions. But being born again is something this series hasn't talked about before. Doja Kim has to have our last way to survive the apocalypse. And I hope it's the best one, because so far it's being alone or losing your morals. So what does Doja Kim and the idea of a rebirth have to do with the last way? I'll be honest, I'm kind of struggling with this one. I've tossed around the idea of change. Rebirth is often used as more of a narrative piece. The idea that you rebirth into a new person. Change holds itself along with most of the series as well. In the beginning, Doja Kim wanted the genre of his life to change, and that it did. From slice of life to action fantasy. Doja Kim also changes in some ways, but weirdly, not enough. I think a part of rebirth that is overlooked is change alongside being the same person. You're still you. Doja Kim is still him. He doesn't become a fighter, he doesn't become a leader, he doesn't become a god, he doesn't even become a protagonist. But he's still a reader. Someone who understands what and who they are. What he can keep the same and what he needs to change about himself. Understanding that the world is changing and there are things that he needs to change about himself, but there are also some things that he could keep. I think. Honestly, still a little confused on what it all means, but that's just what I think. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to get a second opinion. But like always, thank you for watching, and I hope I'll see you next week. Take care.